Good morning. Welcome to the special episode for Eagle News for the September 10th and 11th, 2021 Patriot Day.
Today, Eagle News will take a look back at one of the longest days in American history. Let's start our broadcast today with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My name is Ian.
And my name is Madi. September 11, 2001. It was the beginning of the school day, at the beginning of the school year, at the beginning of the millennium. Millions of American children were in classrooms on the morning of September 11, 2001, when hijackers flew planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon.
Then President George W. Bush was in the classroom too, reading with young Florida students until his chief of staff whispered in his ear, "America is under attack."
Take a look at the story.
"9/11 would become a date to remember. The job of a president is to protect the American people from harm. And some presidents don't need to worry about that, and some do. And it turns out I was one that did.
My assistant came in and said, "A plane is at the World Trade Center." And I said, "Well, that's a strange accident." And I called the president. Initially, we thought maybe a small plane of some kind. And he said, "Well, keep me posted."
He'd been told that a small twin-engine prop plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. That's a horrible accident. I was concerned, but I did not think of it as a national security threat.
I remember when he came in, even as a 7-year-old, you know who the president is, right? And I remember even feeling that young feeling kind of starstruck and giddy, like I'm going to Disney World or something. And I put my hand over my heart. When you think about patriotic things when you're that little, you do the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and I literally put my hand over my heart.
I asked my communicators if they could find a television. And at about 1 minute after 9, they came back in with a television set. So we brought CNN up. I was calling the White House Situation Room to talk to my senior duty officer. So I was chatting with him on the handset and watched the television as the rest of the country was watching the television at 9:03 when the second aircraft impacted into the second World Trade Center tower.
When the second plane hit, there was an audible gasp of air in the room. Some people put their hand on their chest. It was two realizations, right? One, that the immediate death toll, and then the fact that this was an attack on America.
More. Yes, more. Get ready. Light. Yes, light. Get ready.
It hits me as I'm standing there next to the president to the left that the president's the only one that doesn't know the second plane has hit the building.
I had to deliver a message that the president didn't expect to hear and was almost unbelievable. But it also literally was the message he had to hear, whether he wanted to or not.
Andy Card comes up to behind me and says, "Second plane has hit the second tower. America's under attack." And I'm watching a child read. And then I see the press in the back of the room beginning to get the same message I just got. And I could see the horror etched on the face of the news people who had just gotten the same news. During a crisis, it's really important to set a tone and not to panic. And so I waited for the appropriate moment to leave the classroom. I didn't want to do anything dramatic. I didn't want to, lurch out of the chair and scare the classroom full of children. And so I waited.
Try it again. Get ready for the beginning of that sentence. Get ready.
She played with her boat in her house.
I was studying him intently, and his mouth was kind of drawn and tight. And there was for just a brief moment, sort of a startled look in his eyes, and also a weightiness to him, if you will. I could tell he was really focused on trying to get through that event.
You're literally seeing the mindset of the President of the United States play out on TV. Everything about what he thought he was about as a president is changing right in front of you. We hear about the great wartime leaders, Churchill, Roosevelt, others, days, if not weeks, to process and gird themselves for what was ahead. This is all happening in real time.
At 8:46 a.m. on a clear Tuesday morning, an American Airlines Flight 11 loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel and crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Then 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767 United Airlines Flight 175 appeared out of the sky, turned sharply toward the World Trade Center, and sliced into the South Tower near the 75th floor.
American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C., before crashing to the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m.
Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of a portion of the giant concrete building, which is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense.
All told, 125 military personnel and civilians were killed at the Pentagon, alongside with 64 people aboard the airliner.
Let's take a look at a timeline of events back on September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago.
September 11th, 2001. A day of grief. A day of courage. This is how that day unfolded.
My daughter called me. She said, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center. I said, nah, you gotta be kidding. It's gotta be a Piper Cub or some clown was flying down the river.
At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, with 92 aboard, traveling at a speed of 470 miles per hour, strikes the North Tower of the World Trade Center complex. Within minutes, officials coordinate the citywide emergency response. Their base of operations is a state-of-the-art command center located on the 23rd floor of 7 World Trade Center. With one tower in flames, the tragedy is only beginning. It is 9:03 when United Airlines Flight 175, with 65 aboard, traveling at the speed of 590 miles per hour, smashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. This aircraft strikes the corner of the South Tower. It rips a diagonally shaped gash from the 84th to the 78th floors. The South Tower lasts only 56 minutes before it succumbs at 9:59 a.m. The dust cloud billows outward for blocks. Victims stagger away. At 10:28, the television mast atop the North Tower spears straight down.
Once the collapse started, there really wasn't any way to stop it. It was just going to go all the way down once it got started.
Chaos in New York City. Power is down in Lower Manhattan. Phone lines jammed with more than 230 million calls. Hundreds of firefighters trapped in the towers. Hundreds more race to the scene. Falling debris from the collapse of the North and South Towers ignites fires in the neighboring buildings of the World Trade Center. World Trade 4, 5, and 6 are ablaze. World Trade 7, The building housing the city's command center burns unchecked for 7 hours. At 5:20, it collapses. The city's emergency nerve center is destroyed.
Somewhere in that time, and it's very hard to keep track of time during this, they had been ordered to evacuate number 7 by the Port Authority. To this day, we don't know who gave that order, but whoever it was saved a lot of people's lives.
With New York a war zone, some residents walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to get out of the city. Others seek escape in vessels piloted by the Army Corps of Engineers. At 7:45 p.m., the New York Police Department says 78 officers are missing and estimates that 200 firefighters are dead. At 10:56 p.m., police officials say they believe there are victims alive in the rubble of the World Trade Center.
Working with urban search and rescue teams, there was a lot of areas to be searched underneath the debris field. There were voids that had to be searched for possible live people.
September 11th, 2001, the longest and most tragic day in New York's history, is drawing to a close.
Meanwhile, a 4th California-bound plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked about 40 minutes after leaving New York Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane had been delayed in taking off, passengers on board learned of the events in New York and Washington via cell phone and air phone calls to the ground. Knowing that the aircraft was not returning to an airport as the hijackers claimed, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurrection.
And were suspected to attack the cockpit with a fire extinguisher.
The plane then flipped over and sped toward the ground at upwards of 500 miles per hour, crashing in a rural field near Shanksville in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m.
All 44 people aboard were killed. Its intended target is not known, but the theories include the White House, the U.S. Capitol, and Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland, or one of the several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard.
Let's spend a couple minutes and visit the 9/11 memorial that is located at the exact spot where the Twin Towers once stood.
My birthday was September 9th, so I had just turned 9. My dad was one of the 23 police officers, same as Ramon Suarez. I miss him a lot. I really do. Seeing his name in the memorial, it means everything.
On September 11, 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked. It became known as Ground Zero. After years of hard work and rebuilding, the entire site has been transformed into one of beauty and of remembrance. At its heart is the National 9/11 Memorial. Millions of visitors from all around the world come to this site to pay their respects each year. What they see are 2 enormous reflecting pools that sit in the very footprints of where the Twin Towers stood. The pools are surrounded by bronze panels inscribed with the names of the nearly 3,000 people who died in the attacks of 2001 and the World Trade Center bombing in 1993.
When you come to the memorial, you come up to the edge of each one of these voids, and you see this enormous empty space in front of you. It's a space that can't be filled and will not be filled. It is there where you encounter the names of the dead.
First impression you have as a visitor is how many names there are. It's a sea of names over an ocean of tears.
The Memorial Plaza, made up of hundreds of swamp white oak trees, surrounds the memorial pools. One tree is different. It is a Callery pear tree, now known as the Survivor Tree. This tree was at the site on September 11th, 2001. Discovered in a pile of rubble by some recovery workers. It was nursed back to health and returned here. And in some sense, it really embodies the whole experience of 9/11 in a living being. It is damaged, but it also shows a tremendous amount of new growth.
And now there are no words to describe how bad it was. The massive debris field, the smell of death completely took over your whole being. To work out of that to where we are now, it was a slow, hard process.
As bad as 9/11 was, it demonstrated that when the times require, we do have the capacity to come together and take care of each other with limitless compassion.
I remember that day. I remember where I was and what I was doing. My generation, we remember growing up with it. It's like you were part of history. Makes me very proud to know that my dad went out the way for strangers. That's what I call a hero. Nobody ever wants to forget those people that passed away that day. Those people were brothers, wives, mothers, sisters, friends, and those people should be remembered in every way possible.
Every single person that comes here is making a contribution. You truly are our future. Thank you.
Before we go, Eagle News took some time and sat down with some teachers to ask them about their experience on September 11th, 2001. For example, Mr. Madi was teaching 3rd grade and doing his daily sentence corrections with his students. When his boss, Mrs. Nolan, told him that there was a bombing at one of the Trade Center buildings. He went on with his work, and the day ended up being one of the hardest days he has ever worked. Eventually, two of his 3rd graders got picked up by their parents. It's a day he talks about with us in Eagle News every 9/11. Now let's see what other teachers experience on 9/11.
One of my memories from 9/11, I was teaching 4th grade over at Tyler Run. We had just opened the building. It was quite possibly, that and Columbine were two of the worst days I've ever had as a teacher.
So I was in 7th grade, and I was going to my second period class, which was band. And the band teacher had the TV on, and we saw the second plane had just crashed into the second tower.
I was a junior in high school, Mrs. Meng's computer class, and we turned on the TV and we saw what happened. It was terrifying. We were unknown of what was going to happen. It was kind of a crazy time. Lots of kids left school that day, and I just remember sitting on my front porch with my parents and talking about what had happened. And I was supposed to have a volleyball game that night. Everything got canceled, and that was that.
All right, so during 9/11, I was actually in Detroit, and I remember being at work and them sending everybody home. Everybody was kind of confused and trying to realize what was going on, and obviously I got home and turned on the news and kept seeing the 9/11 happening.
All right, so on September 1st, 2001, I was a sophomore. I was sitting in my high school Spanish class, and I remember when the first plane hit the towers, our Spanish teacher heard about it, put it on the news, and I was really lucky that he kind of left it on, and so we actually got to see live as the second plane hit, and when kind of everyone realized that it wasn't a random act or a mistake, that it was actually a terrorist attack. So that was pretty crazy to actually see the plane hit the second tower live.
And then the rest of the day, it was just crazy. Everybody was kind of gathered around TVs, just trying to figure out what was going on. It was just chaos. Nobody knew what was going on. We knew that eventually there would be the 4 planes, but were there more? Nobody knew. It was just a day of just being nervous, and everybody was.
For 9/11, I was actually teaching at Liberty Middle School. I was still teaching 7th grade science. So it was a day that we'll never forget.
For me, it's really hard to believe that this is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I never really understood the significance of an event like this until I've lived through it. It was just a horrible, tragic event that, as I watch videos and TV and see the news now, it still is very difficult to watch.
Well, it's crazy. I'll never forget that day. I was actually at Ohio Dominican. I was on my final year of school, and we stopped classes immediately and all went together and watched on a huge screen that took up the whole wall. It will stay with me for the rest of my life. I'll never forget seeing that impact. I just watched the news this morning and I saw the same thing. They were repeating it, and it's kind of a little traumatizing, but yeah, very sad.
And it was extremely difficult as a teacher to kind of hold it together, knowing what was happening. We were in complete shock. It's still haunting to this day, the images that I remember seeing that day.
I was working at Highlights for Children, the publishing company, and we had the warehouse people listening to the radio. I vividly remember that day just trying to get a hold of my friends and my brother, or my friend's brother, making sure everybody was okay.
And I was, when 9/11 happened, I was teaching at Liberty Middle School. I was teaching 7th grade English and language arts. And I had just gotten married that summer, and my husband was traveling for work, and so he was actually on an airplane to California at the time that the planes started going down. And Mrs. Hollabaugh came across the hallway to my room and said, you know, I don't want to alarm you, but there are plane crashes happening, and I know your husband is on a plane right now. So we turned on the TV and we saw the footage of the planes crashing, and I immediately started calling his cell phone, and he wasn't answering because all the cell phones across the country were jammed, and I couldn't get a hold of him all day, and I was probably panicking a little bit, and then he finally called our secretary at the time, Mrs. Lenahan, and left a message with her that he had been diverted and they landed, and he was going to be stuck in California for a couple weeks because they had grounded all of the planes.
It was just really, I don't think anyone that really was old enough to experience it on any level, either having people that that they knew that were in the buildings or in New York or anything. I don't think anyone's going to forget their feelings that they went through, because we never felt like this before. So it was an incredible day. It was a horrible day, but the feeling that you got in the days and weeks after was just a tremendous feeling of like unity with people around you and in our country, and that was something that I think we've definitely forgotten.
Thank you for watching this special Eagle News. Never forget 9/11. Talk about the happenings of this day with your family when you get home tonight. I'm Ian.
And I'm Maddie.
And I am Liam. Before we go, let's pause for a moment of silence to remember those we lost at 9/11.